Hello everyone, welcome to the workshop Integrating Contract Tests in a Continuous Integration Pipeline. My name is Julian Vargas, Engineering Manager at API Testing Team. First of all, an overview of what contract tests is. It's the process of validating that an API consumer and an API producer both exercise the requirements specified in an Open API contract. For the case of the API consumer, we will use Pastry as our mock server running in our local. And for the case of the producer, we will feed the contract into API testing to validate that the producer is also exercising the contract. We will use in the cloud the API testing product, and in our local environment, the CI process, we develop, commit, the CI server, which is also our computer, and the release process is basically running the application locally. For this, we will need an active Sauce Labs account for creating our testing project, Sauce Connect for running a tunnel that will allow the cloud access our local computer. Dino will be our runtime because the code will be written in TypeScript, and we will use a Git for source control and the CI server. The requirement is as follows. As a user, I want to be able to know which is the best sauce to use for a given food so that I can enjoy my food in the best way possible. The acceptance criteria is, this will be a command line application that will receive the food name and will print in the terminal the name of the best sauce for that given food. For example, sauce for fries will print ketchup. This application will consume an HTTP API with one endpoint, /sauce, with a mandatory query parameter _4 that will contain the name of the food. The API will return a JSON document with only one property, sauce name, containing the name of the best sauce for the given food. For example, this is the example JSON sauce name with ketchup. And finally, there will be a server that will expose the endpoint 8000/sauce for any GET request, and it will, based on the parameter /4, will read the name of that particular food and will return the best sauce for the given input. The folder structure, we will work with Git repository that will contain the project templates. And inside we will have the sauce recipe, which is the main folder. And inside that folder, there will be two folders, the client and the server. In the client, we will have the test, the implementation, and the contract. And in the server, basically the same. We will have test, the implementation of the business logic, the HTTP server that will expose the business logic through the port 8000, and the tunnel. In the root folder, we will have the test suite.sh, which is basically a script that runs all the tests. So starting with the consumer side, we will implement the client using Pastry as our mock server, and we will customize our contract. So let's start with cloning the repository. We clone, and in order to save our changes in our local environment, we will create a bare Git repository in our temporary folder. This will allow us to push our changes to our local computer instead of GitHub. So this is the structure as shown in the slide. And now let's remove the reference to GitHub, which is the origin, and let's add the origin again, pointing to our local computer. Okay, all Git repositories have a hidden folder called .git, and inside that folder, we will have another called hooks, and inside that one, there will be an example of the different hooks that Git uses. We are going to work with this one, which is called prehook.sample. So first of all, we are going to rename this file and just call it pre-push, removing the extension. so that is no longer a placeholder and Git uses it for real. Let's now open that file, .git hooks prepush, remove everything in there, and let's add our own recipe. So we will echo, this is better than Jenkins, then running tests, and then we source the test suite.sh, which is our custom script for running our tests. This file is located in the root folder. So let's now open this file and include our recipe for now. This is just a temporary message that we will remove later. Now that we have our hook and our test suite in place, let's commit these changes to check that everything is working. So after I push to master, I will see these two lines. This is better than Jenkins. It is actually pushing to my local temporary file with the two lines from the hook and the line from the test suite. Good. We have the continuous integration server set up. Let's test it just for fun. I will create an empty commit and push again. And my two lines and the one from the test suite. So it is indeed working. I'm going to open a new terminal and cd into the source client, which is the first part that I'm going to implement. I'm going to open the tests. So I have my template, and for fries, I am expecting ketchup. I run this from the source client, dino test, allow net. This modifier is because we need to, at some point, access the network. So the test is failing because there is no implementation. So I import my file, my function that implements the logic, still failing. And let's continue with the implementation. So I open my source.ts. I receive food of type string. It will return a promise because it's a web request. The final document will return source name, and in the URL I will query /source _for, and I interpolate the parameter received and will return the JSON with the source name. I run the test again, and it's still failing, and this is because nothing is running in port 5000. So now we need to open a new window for Pastry, but before that, let's work with the contract. So let's open the contract inside source client. It's an OpenAPI 3.0 contract, basic template. So let's add some details. /source is the path. I will do a get. The parameter is called for. Type string is required, and I'm going to do include an example, fries. And the returning, the result will be an object with property source name required of type string, and I will provide an example so that I can interact with. Then from this folder, source client, I will run Pastry by mock server using Docker. I will use the map the volume, my current path. So all this path here is my PWD, and I will map it to /specs inside the container. And I will map my port. Which port? Let's see. From the client, I am requesting 245,000. So 5,000 to the same port inside the container. And then the image, Pastry, and I will use /specs and the contract that we just validated. And we use the validate request as a modifier. I forgot to include the run. Yes. So now Pastry is going to run, will read the contract, will map, will run import 5,000, and the contract says that my URL is /source, receiving get request. So just to try it, let's make a request 5,000 /source for fries, and I receive source name ketchup. This is the example I included in the contract. And Pie3 will receive the GET request and it will be successful. Now let's see what happens if I don't use a valid URL. I receive an error because 4 is required. And Pie3 returns a 400 because I'm using the validate request modifier when running the container. Okay. Let's now run the test again and see what happens. Okay, the front end is working. Now I'm performing request to my mock server and I'm receiving the expected document. All thanks to Pie3. Okay, now that is working, I'm going to include this test in my test recipe, which is in the root folder. I open test suite, I remove this temporary message, and then echo running front-end tests. Since I'm running this in the root folder, I cd into source client, and then I boot up the mock server. And I will give it, let's say, 5 seconds to boot up. And I will run this container with -d for running in the background. And then I use the same line for the test. Put it here. Right? And after running the test, I need to do some cleanup. So I will stop the containers, the one I run in line number 4, and I will cd to the root folder. Check my status, the files I changed, the contract, test, implementation, and the test suite. I'll add my changes, my commit, and push to master. It runs the container, sleeps for 5 seconds, run the front-end test, both are passing, execute the cleanup, and send the changes to my remote repository. What have we accomplished so far? We have implemented the client application emulating the server side using Pie3. We have implemented a contract from the consumer side point of view, and we have integrated contract testing from the consumer side in a continuous integration pipeline. This is a huge achievement with very little. Okay, now let's talk about the producer side, which is the server. Okay, for this one, we are going to use the contract that we already created, and we will feed it into API testing in the cloud to validate that the producer is actually producing the right responses according to the contract. Back into the terminal, I will cd into source server, and I will open another terminal for editing my code. So I open the tests. In this case, I'm just same thing, fries ketchup. I will run the test. In this case, I'm not using network because it's just my business logic. So I import my file. Still failing. Have my implementation. Receive food of type string. And then my database. Fries goes to ketchup. Rice to honey mustard. And for nuggets, obviously it should be Szechuan sauce. And in case the food is not found in the database, I will default to ketchup. Tests are passing, so the backend, the business logic is running, just the logic, okay? Let's save and close. Back to the root folder, and let's now include this new test in the test suite. So echo running backend, cd to source server. I use the same line for running tests, except that this one is not accessing the network. Check my changes, and I will commit. Push to master, same thing. And now we have also backend test passing, and everything is working fine. Okay. Now I'm going to create my server, my HTTP server. So I open the business logic that I already implemented. I will read the query stream _4 and will default to fries in case nothing is specified. And the document I will return will be delicious sauce, and then the corresponding sauce that I retrieved from my database. So delicious sauce type string, and I will call my sauce 4, pass the food, which is the one I received from the query string. I save. This contains an error, an intentional error that we will fix later. Okay, now that we have the server implemented, we are going to run it. So we do dino run allow-net because this one is accessing port 8000. Remember, 5000 for frontend, 8000 for backend. Now let's test it. Localhost 8000 sauce for fries. Ketchup for rice is honey mustard, and for nuggets is Szechuan sauce. So we are accessing the real database. Good. Now, how can we access our local host from the cloud? So what we are going to do now is opening a tunnel. So using this template, I included two possible endpoints, one for America, one for Europe. I will keep the Europe. And from my sauce account, I will copy my username, put in here, and my API key, my access key, here. And I will also add a name for my tunnel. This one is contract testing production. Save my changes. This is my server. And from here, I will go to my recipe project, and I will run sauce connect config tunnel.yaml. It takes a while to spin up, and once it's running, I'll be able to access my local host from the cloud. So now I'm going to open the contract, because now that we have an application running in port 8000, we need to report that in the contract. So here I'm going to add servers, URL, localhost 8000. Good. And from here, the API testing, I don't have any project, so I'm going to create one by importing this file. From the HTTP client, I will import my contract YAML. Remember that it is in a source recipe, source client. I will select here to save it, save the snapshot. Then I will expand the snapshot, and I have my get/sauce as described in the contract with the for example running localhost 8000. I select from here my tunnel. And now I'm going to generate my test. So enter a name. And here I have two lines, the get request and the validation part, which is the most interesting right now. So we are expecting a source name required of type string. I check my tunnel here and run the test. So since I included an intentional error, this should fail. So let's see why it is failing. Zoom in a little bit. So source name is required. So let's see how we can fix it. The error is because in the server, I am returning, I'm going to remove this test just to avoid pollution. And from the HTTP client, let's remove this snapshot. So I was saying in the server, I'm returning delicious sauce, and the contract is expecting sauce name. So I'm going to change the contract very naively. Sauce name, sorry, delicious sauce and delicious sauce. The property and the example. I stop my API server, run again, and I'm going to import the contract again. Same file with different values. I save it here, root folder, expand. This is my endpoint. I generate my tests, test include side, and let me check the validation. I have the tunnel. I'm expecting delicious sauce, required true, type string. I run the test, and now it's passing. It's passing because the contract expects sauce, delicious sauce, and that is what the server is returning, so both are aligned. Good. Let's see what happens next. Okay, now that we have our contract updated with these changes, the delicious sauce, I'm gonna close it, and it's time for a commit. So I add my changes, commit my changes, and push to master to run the integration. Wow, it's failing. The front end is failing. But why? Okay, let's see. That is why the error was intentional. So let's open here the source client, source.ts, and I'm expecting source name, and the server is returning, and the contract is also returning delicious sauce. But since the front end was already running and working fine, it's my error as a backend developer, and I need to fix it. So I restore the contract as it was before, and I change my implementation of the server to return source name. I spin up my server again, remove my noisy tests and the snapshot, and I will import my contract again, hopefully for the last time. Expand, generate test again, same deal. I check the validation. It's validating source name as it should be. Run the test. The producer is passing, so I'm going to publish this test. Good. And now I'm going to commit my changes with my new fix. Pushing into master. Let's try again. The front end is passing, good. And the business logic is passing, good. So now we have the fries, we have the ketchup. Now let's put some cherries on top. This is the part missing. We are not having any monitoring here. We have run a couple of tests and nothing is being monitored. So I'm going to add that part. So in order to create monitoring, let us create first a webhook called monitoring contracts, and that will give us this URL. Let's copy back to the terminal, and here I'm going to edit my test suite. To store that URL, I'm going to, let's do, create an environment variable called webhook, and this access key placeholder, let's remove that one, and I'm going to take this value, the value I need from the tunnel file, which is the app key, copy and paste here. Then I will, for the pastry server, I will do -logger webhook /insights events contract. So every time PyStream receives a request, the result will be posted to the logger. And now I'm going to run using the CTL, the test, and I will report also to the webhook. So I open the test I published, I copy the ID, I put it in here. Is here, and this parameter, the uppercase T, is for the tunnel. So I copy the tunnel ID, put it in here, save the changes. I add my changes, and look, the dashboard was empty. So now when I run my changes, PyStream will report the results to the dashboard. Look, the front end is passing and the request is good. And now the backend runs, which is local. So no surprises there. And after that, we are using the CTL to run the contract test. And that one is also passing. Good, that is wonderful. So what have we achieved so far? We have implemented the contract test producer side. We have tested the contract from the producer side, integrating Sauce Labs API testing, and we have a fully integrated contract testing workflow within a continuous integration pipeline. Thank you very much.